Welcome back, Python pioneers, and we are jumping straight into Mu again today. We want to talk about something called importing, and this is a very, very important and very useful feature for programming in general. So the idea is really simple. Other people write code, and you get to use that code, which is awesome. So far, everything we've done has been using built-in Python functions and some of the things that the Python interpreter already knows how to handle. And after they developed this baseline Python uh, interpreter, other people went and they wrote code that can do even more specialized things. So what does that look like? How do we do that? So it's the keyword that you have to use is import. Okay? So you type out import, and then all you type is the name of the library that you're trying to use, or the module that you're trying to use. So for example, in Automate the Boring Stuff, in chapter 2, they give the example of the random library. So random allows you to generate random numbers. Now, the random numbers that are used here should not be used for encryption or anything like that. We call them pseudo-random numbers because they're not actually random. So just something to throw out there. Depending on what you're trying to use this for, just be wary that you can't use this for security purposes. Okay, so before we import random though, I want to show you how I would go about this. First of all, if we click play, and like all the other videos, let's look at the help. And watch what happens. If I type random, I get an error and it says name random is not defined. Anytime you see that and you know it's something that should be defined, that's a really good clue that the problem is you haven't imported that library, or maybe you typed a name wrong. So in our case, we haven't imported random yet, so the interpreter doesn't know what we're talking about. So down in the interpreter, in the terminal, or the interactive shell, whatever you want to call it, say import random. Press enter, and there you go. We now have random imported. Now if I type help on random, I'm going to get a ton of stuff. Okay? The most important thing though that I wanted to show you here, now I wouldn't recommend necessarily trying to learn about how to use random this way, because there's just so much to read through, but you could just probably honestly Google, the random module in Python and learn about that way on a website. Probably be much easier to read through. But what I wanted to show you is down here we have file. Okay, this is the file that the random module has been written in. That's where all the code is. Now, not every module is written as a Python file like this one is. Some of them, like in the book, they talk about sys for system. That module is actually written in a different programming language, and so you can't even view the code for it. But I want to show you with this file, maybe this will help it make sense. So if I click load, and I'm just going to paste in that path that we just copied, and we know the file name is random.py, so I'm just going to press, you got to delete off random.py because we don't want to try to open the file. We just want to go to the directory that it's in, and I'm already there. So I'm gonna, I think I was testing this before, so it remembered that I was already there, but you might have to paste that in and navigate. And if I scroll down and look for random, there it is. Let's open that. And I'm going to click stop so we're not looking at the interactive shell anymore. And here you go. This is the code that someone else wrote for random. Now this is a bunch of comments at the top and then a bunch of imports. They actually have from in the beginning, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But you can see, just scroll through and you don't even need to understand how all this works. That's the beauty of it. Someone else did some crazy stuff here and you get to use it. You don't have to do all this. So that's the beauty of import. You get to use their code. So up at the top, right, they had from. I said to use import, but their import is a little further down and it says from first. So what you can do is when I import random, if I just say over here in our code file, if I say import random, everything that's defined in this random.py file is imported. And there's a lot of stuff in here. If we scroll to the very bottom, it's 815 lines. Maybe I don't want everything from random. Maybe there's some things inside of random I don't need. So I can say, if you look at the top of their code, which holds your eyes, okay. So for example, they say from warnings, import warn. Okay. So what they're saying is they could have just said import warnings and they would have gotten everything from the warnings module. Instead, all they wanted to use out of that module was something called warn. And so they say from warnings, import warn. And then another thing that you can do is you can say as. So you can change how you refer to the thing you imported. So let's look at what that looks like. So if I say import random, I now have, if I run that code, nothing really happens, right? We basically told the interpreter, hey, we want to use stuff in random, but we never did. So how do we use the things that we imported from other people's code? So for random, what we'll do, there's a nice function, which let's use print, and there's a nice function that will generate a random number between a range that you give it. And that function, actually, let's do help first because I want you to see how you could read more about it. So to reference any function inside of a module, right, you can't just type out the function name. You have to reference the module it's coming from. So for example, random dot. Now the dot is the important part here. So random at, dot, whatever I list after this is going to be something that comes from the random module. There's actually quite a few things you can see here, quite a few options. Let's see. What we want to do is rand int, and it's already trying to help me here. So it's suggesting rand int. And if I do a open bracket, there you go. It's already describing it actually. So maybe we don't need to use help. It just says print or returns a random integer in the range of A through B, including both endpoints. Okay. So, if we do run help on this, it's just going to say the same exact thing. So I really wanted to show you though that help can be used on other things outside of built-in functions, but it just depends on who wrote the module and if they provided documentation for their functions. So pretty simple function. All it does is return a random number in the range, and it's inclusive for the start and the end. So let's do that. So if I give it a start, we're getting the description for print right there. Okay, so let's do 1 through 10. So it's going to print a random number between 1 and 10 inclusive. So let's run that. 10. 5, 9. See, it's random every time. 5, 3. Okay, so usually, and so just to give you a little bit of background, when I said this isn't actually random, usually the way it works, there's a lot of crazy math behind the scenes, but what you need to do is provide a seed for a random number generator. That's what they're called, seeds. And usually the way they work is they seed with the current time. So I've seen that quite a bit. And when you seed with the current time, well, every time you run it, the time is different. So you have a different seed and you get a different output. But the important thing here is, with a random number generator, if you provide the same seed over and over, you'll get the same output every time. That's why they're called random or pseudo-random numbers. Okay, so that's random. We went a little bit more in detail there because this is a useful module for if you want to create a game or something like that. And in the next video, we're actually going to create rock, paper, scissors. So random will be important for that. So, okay, another one that's useful is sys. So this is a module, an example of a module that you can't read the code for because it's written in C, another programming language. So we can't go look at the code for sys right now, but there's a useful function in sys. So just to show you another example of calling a function, sometimes when you're in a Python program, you might want to end the program early, okay? So let's say there's, you get through your code, let's say some code here, and you have some more code here. Let's add that space just so it looks nice. And then let's say, we check for some error. And let's say we check for that error and there's a problem and we're like, eesh, we need to really stop. We don't want the program to go anymore. One way you can do that is with sysexit. So if you run the program like that, it will exit. So if we run this program, we get sysexit. It just literally exits. Now it throws, you have a traceback that comes up because you exited in this way. That's because the program didn't finish running normally. You hit a system exit. This can be really useful though for debugging. So if you're running into a problem in your code and you want to test out what some value is before you get further down in your code, and you just I want to get to this point, I want to check this value, and I don't want to run the rest of my program. I just want to stop because I really just want to check the value at this specific point. One way you can do that is just throw a sysexit in after you're debugging print statements that you've typed out, and your program won't run any further. So big takeaways from import. You can type out import and provide a module name like random, right? When you reference a function from that module, you have to type out the module name. So like rand int. Now, if you want, you can add an as. I could say import random as R, and then that would work fine instead of typing random. I'm just saying, hey, instead of typing random, I want you to let me just type R. And that works fine. So, and you still get, see, it's still trying to autocomplete for me. So it knows that that's random. It's just nice for reading. So really that's all it's for. If you don't want to type out a long thing, you can just say as R or as rand, something like that. It's up to you. The other key takeaway, I can say from random import rand int, okay? And when I do that, let me add that space. Now the only thing I'm getting from random is rand int, and I can just type that out now because I have specified the exact function that I want. Now, so just to show you, that this works, if I print rand int 1 through 10 and run that, we get 3. That works. Now, this is generally not, a good thing to do. With a caveat, it can be good if you're just using one specific thing. You just want to be careful that you don't accidentally later, very soon in the next week, we're going to learn about defining your own functions, and you just want to make sure you don't have any collisions where you name the same function as something that's already defined and being used. But one of the things they talk about in the book that you don't want to do is import star. Okay. Now, this is something, the star in programming, usually in a lot of places, we call it the wildcard. And basically what it means is match everything. It just means literally everything. So from random, import everything. And what that would do, right? I could come down here just like I was doing and use rand int. But I've just imported everything into my scope like that. And now I don't even know what came from random. There could be some other function. When I start typing these out, for example, what do I get? Rand range. Maybe I end up defining something called rand range. There's going to be a collision. We don't want that. So don't do this. Don't do import star. If you see that in code, don't do that. Just import random. And if import random as R or something, and use that R with the member access operator. I think that's what it's called. It is in C++, so I'm going to call it that. So member access operator or period, whichever one's easier for you to remember. So that works. Okay, last thing. When you save a file, see the name of this file, it might be hard to read, but the name of this file is example.py. If I save this file and I name it random.py, I have a problem, because when I type import, it's going to try to import my file. Because when you type import, it'll actually, you have the chance of it thinking your file is the random that you want to import. So don't name your files the same as a module name. So give it a different name. Okay, that is it for import and for naming your files. That's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to make rock, paper, scissors. See you there.